Story 1. Unusual occurrences in my funeral home apartment. Not too long ago, I experienced one of the oddest and most unexplainable events I've ever encountered. To set the stage, I live in an apartment that's linked to an old funeral home. My chosen career path led me to study mortuary science and my desire for hands. On experience brought me to work at this very funeral home as a student. This unique living arrangement came about because the funeral home had an empty apartment hidden away at the back, a place too affordable to turn down. Little did I know that it would be home to some truly inexplicable phenomena. When I initially moved in, I kept my strange experiences to myself. I didn't want to perpetuate the spooky reputation that often accompanies funeral homes. The first few months, it was easy to write off the strange occurrences as mere coincidences or products of an overactive imagination. However, as time passed, these unsettling events began to increase in both frequency and intensity. It was becoming clear that there was something undeniably unusual about this place. Eventually, I couldn't keep these occurrences to myself any longer, and I decided to confide in one of my co-workers. Much to my surprise, she shared similar experiences. It seemed I was not alone in feeling that there was an unexplainable presence lingering here. Now, let's delve into the peculiar incident that transpired not too long ago. It was an ordinary day. I returned home from my classes, feeling the usual sense of relief that washes over you when you step inside your own four wall. Yet, something was off. My apartment felt darker than usual, and an inexplicable unease settled over me like a heavy shroud. I was in the bathroom just braiding my hair when my phone chimed with a text message. It was from a coworker who expressed a strange and uneasy feeling. She asked me to check the funeral home's front doors to ensure they were securely locked. As I read her message, the room seemed to grow even darker, and a shiver ran down my spine. She added, "I'm 99. Sure, I locked it, but I just have this nagging feeling." I hesitated for a moment, but eventually decided to investigate. I finished braiding my hair and slipped on my shoes. My apartment had a door that led directly into the funeral home's interior, and it was through this door that I embarked on my unsettling journey. The hallway was dimly lit, with motion sensors that would typically illuminate the path. I made my way to the front lobby, where the only source of light was the faint glow seeping through the windows. I approached the front doors and, to my surprise, found them unlocked. The sense of being watched grew stronger with each passing second. I kept turning around to glance over my shoulder, but the darkness of the lobby obscured my vision. I hurriedly locked the doors and turned to retrace my steps. Just as I was about to step into the hallway, a chilling sound reached my ears. The unmistakable sound of a little girl giggling. It was as if it came from a door a mere 6 feet away from me. My body froze for a moment, and I caught just the faintest echo of her giggle before it faded into the eerie silence. The source seemed to be lurking behind that door. I needed no further encouragement to make a hasty retreat. I dashed back into the comforting embrace of the well-lit hallway and sought refuge in the sanctuary of my apartment. I locked the door behind me, my heart pounding furiously. Almost immediately, a loud bang echoed from within one of the rooms in the funeral home. My curiosity battled my fear, but I ultimately chose the path of safety and dared not investigate it. As I stood in my apartment, trembling with a cocktail of fear and curiosity, I grabbed my phone and sent a message to my coworker. The doors were both unlocked. While I began typing out the story of what had transpired, her response came swiftly. "Eichmann, I've been getting weird vibes in there all day." It appeared that the spirits or entities in the funeral home were particularly active on this day. It had been a few weeks since I'd experienced anything quite so strange, and now my nerves were once again on edge. Among the mysterious apparitions myself and some co-workers had encountered were two distinct entities. The first was a little girl who appeared to be around 8 years old, slightly taller than an average child of her age. She manifested so briefly that one would question whether they'd seen her at all. Curiously, her giggle sounded like that of a 6-year-old, a strange contradiction to her appearance. The other entity was a tall, shadowy figure. This enigmatic presence was shrouded in a long black coat and wore a matching black hat. It was an entirely different type of mystery. My current state of mind can best be described as unease. Some days in this place are weirder than others, and tonight is shaping up to be one of those nights where sleep may prove elusive. I'm filled with a potent mix of anxiety and anticipation, as if I'm merely waiting for the next inexplicable event to unfold. Story 2 title: Shadows of the Crematory. An unearthly encounter. I worked at a funeral home once. The night at the funeral home was unusually quiet, with only the faint hum of the cooling system and the distant hoot of an owl breaking the silence. My shift had started at 11 p.m., and I was still getting accustomed to the solitude of working the night shift. Sam, the regular night shift worker, had called in sick, leaving me to manage everything alone. I'd been employed at the funeral home for just a few months, primarily handling administrative tasks like paperwork and offering support to grieving families during viewings and funerals. However, tonight was different. I had been tasked with operating the crematory, something I'd done only a few times before under Sam's supervision. It made me uneasy, but I was determined to prove my competence. Around 1 a.m. the phone rang, and Jerry, the funeral home's owner, asked me to prepare the crematory for a new arrival, a deceased man named Andrew Denson. Jerry explained that Andrew's family had requested a swift cremation, and I agreed to make the necessary arrangements. As I wheeled the gurney bearing Andrew's body into the room containing the crematory, an eerie sensation washed over me. I attributed it to exhaustion and my unfamiliarity with the task at hand, yet I couldn't shake the unease. I carefully placed Andrew's body inside the crematory chamber, set the temperature and timer, and initiated the process. The large machine roared to life, and I stepped back, feeling the intense heat wash over me. But as I stood there, something unusual caught my eye, a glimmer of light. It was my rose quartz necklace, the same one I had been wearing since I started working at the funeral home. Somehow it had slipped off my neck and fallen onto Andrew's body. The heat had caused the leather strap to burn away, leaving the pendant exposed. In a panic, I reached into the crematory to retrieve my necklace. The heat was almost unbearable, and I struggled to grasp it. Just as I managed to snatch the pendant, I heard a strange noise, like a soft, raspy whisper of agony. My heart raced as I withdrew my hand. I stared through the small viewing window on the crematory door, convinced that my exhaustion was playing tricks on my mind. That's when I saw it. Andrew Denson's hand, moving, reaching out toward me. With a surge of terror, I slammed my palm against the emergency shut-off button. The crematory's roaring flames and the unsettling noise ceased abruptly. I was trembling as I opened the door, half expecting to find Andrew Denson miraculously alive inside. But there was nothing, just his lifeless body motionless and untouched by the flames. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread as I pulled Andrew Denson's body out of the crematory. Had my exhaustion and anxiety caused me to hallucinate? I tried to calm myself down, convincing myself that it had been a trick of my tired mind. I continued my duties for the night, preoccupied by the strange incident, but determined to finish my shift. Sam had always told me that working in a funeral home could play tricks on your senses, especially during the night shift. Around 2:30 a.m., I began the process of removing Andrew's ashes from the crematory, still feeling on edge. As I sifted through the ashes, I made a startling discovery. Among the ashes lay fragments of my rose quartz necklace, the same pendant I had just retrieved from inside the crematory. It couldn't have been possible. My stomach churned with unease as I realized that my necklace had somehow ended up in the ashes of the deceased man. I couldn't explain it, and the fear gnawed at me. When my shift finally ended at 5, I went home, exhausted and shaken. I couldn't sleep, haunted by the image of Andrew Denson's reaching hand and the eerie connection between my necklace and his ashes. The following day, Sam was nowhere to be found. He didn't respond to my texts or calls. Jerry didn't seem concerned and assumed Sam was avoiding work. But something didn't sit right with me. Sam had always been reliable, and I couldn't believe he would just disappear without a word. Days passed, and Sam's absence grew more troubling. I tried to explain the strange events with Andrew Denson to Jerry, but he brushed it off as my imagination running wild. I decided to resign from my position, heeding my mother's concerns about the job's legality. A week later, 2 police officers arrived at my door. They informed me that Sam had been found dead, the victim of a brutal murder. The news left me in shock and grief. I told the officers about seeing Sam after midnight on the night he was supposedly killed. They were surprised, but took my statement seriously. As I grappled with the loss of my friend and co-worker, I learned that Sam's body had been discovered deep in the woods, a considerable distance from his abandoned car. He had been brutally beaten, his face disfigured beyond recognition. The authorities suspected foul play by a single assailant. The revelation that I had seen Sam after his supposed murder haunted me. I couldn't explain it, and I became consumed by a desire to find answers. Sam's funeral was scheduled at the same funeral home where we had worked together. Now, on the day of Sam's cremation, I had made up my mind. I wanted to be the one to carry out his final journey. I had accepted that something inexplicable had occurred at the funeral home, and I needed closure. Sam deserved a proper goodbye, and I believed that only I could give it to him. So, as the night fell, I prepared myself to honor Sam's memory and confront the mysteries that had unfolded within the funeral home's walls, uncertain of what I would discover next. Story 3 title: The Eerie Echoes of Morse Code. My journey into funeral work, embarking on a new career path, can often be a daunting prospect, especially when that path leads you into the world of funeral work. My journey into this unusual profession began several years ago, and until now I've only shared my experiences with my wife. However, there is one particular story from those early days that I've rarely recounted. The decision to explore a possible career shift came after a period of soul-searching. Curiosity led me to reach out to several funeral homes in my area, each one a unique institution with its own history and character. It was the oldest and eeriest of them all that expressed an interest in my inquiry. The funeral director, a woman who exuded an air of pleasantness and professionalism, invited me in for a discussion. Much to my surprise, our initial conversation resulted in a job offer. She was open to the idea of me joining her team part-time to get a feel for the industry and assess whether it could be a viable career chain. I gladly accepted, and my adventure into the world of funeral work began. She introduced me to a unique schedule: 1 week on, followed by 1 week off, during which I would help with funeral services and the somber task of removals, the process of picking up the recently deceased. The first time I was called for a removal, it was late at night, around 11:30 p.m. I can't deny feeling an overwhelming sense of nervousness as I prepared to embark on this solemn mission. Arriving at the funeral home, I was met by the director, who was waiting in a removal van with a neatly prepared cot. Our destination was the hospital morgue, where I would receive my baptism into the world of funeral work. With an abundance of patience, she guided me through each step of the removal process, transferring the body from a cold, sterile slab to the cot, securing it safely and ensuring it was wrapped with the utmost care. Upon returning to the funeral home, the deceased person was placed gently onto a table in the preparation room. It was here that my journey into this macabre world became even more intense. Assisting the director in readying the deceased for their final journey, I found myself experiencing a mixture of emotions, from solemnity to curiosity, and a lingering feeling of unease. After we had concluded our somber preparations, I found myself at the sink, washing my hands to cleanse myself of the heaviness that had settled upon me. And then it happened, something inexplicable and profoundly unsettling. Stone on the wall, set to speaker mode, sprang to life without warning. It emitted a dial tone and then produced a series of slow, pronounced sounds that seemed almost deliberate in their eerie nature. Caught between disbelief and fear, I looked to the director for guidance. She, too, seemed unnerved by this inexplicable event. Without a word, she decided that our work for the night had concluded, and we hastily exited the room. The unsettling encounter left me with an indelible sense of unease, as if the spirit of the departed had reached out to us from beyond the veil. 2 days passed, and my duties led me back to the same funeral home. On this occasion, I was tasked with assisting in dressing the deceased in the appropriate attire for their final farewell. And yet, as if guided by some otherworldly force, the unsettling events of that preparation room continued to unfold. Once again, the phone on the wall acted up, producing the same eerie sounds. Unable to shake the sense of foreboding that had enveloped me since that first night, I mustered the courage to inquire if the phone had ever exhibited such behavior before. The director's response was equally unsettling. She admitted that it had not. The following day marked the culmination of our efforts, the funeral service itself. With meticulous preparation, we ensured that everything was in place at the church, and soon mourners began to arrive to pay their respects. The minister delivered a heartfelt eulogy, one that focused on the deceased individual's distinguished military service. It was during this eulogy that the minister dropped a bombshell that sent shivers down my spine. He mentioned that the departed individual had been deeply involved in Morse code-related activities during their lifetime. As I listened to the minister's words, it struck me like a bolt of lightning. The peculiar, deliberate sounds emitted by the phone on that fateful night had resembled Morse code. Could it have been a message from the departed soul, attempting to communicate with us from the other side? This is just one of the many extraordinary and unsettling experiences I encountered during my tenure at that particular funeral home. In due course, I moved on to a different establishment, a more modern facility, free from the eerie occurrences of my previous workplace. But the memory of that unsettling night lingers, leaving me to ponder the meaning of the mysterious Morse code message and the connection between the living and the departed. If you've persevered through the retelling of my experiences in this curious profession, I sincerely appreciate your time and attention. Story 4 title: Whispers in the Dark. Unraveling the secrets of my haunted house, my aversion to horror movies and spooky stories is well documented, a testament to my overactive imagination. Even the mildest of tales could keep me up at night. It's somewhat ironic that I'm now recounting my own unsettling experiences with a tinge of seriousness. Our family's move to a quiet small town was met with a ripple of excitement and curiosity. We settled into a distinctive 2-story house characterized by an imposing facade with a welcoming porch and brick creeping around the foundation. To most it appeared well kept and homely, but beneath its charming exterior lay a tapestry of peculiarities. Upon our initial tour of the house, my sister and I were greeted by a room with not one, not two, but 3 closets. This chamber also featured an ancient glass door that led to the 3rd closet. At that time, its contents were the stuff of nightmares. Dolls, an unsettling collection filling every inch of space. However, we were reassured by the father who owned the house that the dolls belonged to his daughter and would be removed before our move. Even my mother heaved a sigh of relief. Little did we know that this seemingly innocuous closet had once served as a balcony, hastily converted into a storage space. Lack of insulation made it a frigid zone during the winter months. The saga continued with the stairs, those creaky, unsettling stairs. Every step groaned underfoot, but none as loudly as the 3rd from the top. An occurrence so peculiar, it became a staple of the horror genre. It was unnerving, to say the least. However, it was during my birthday party that things took a truly bizarre turn. Most of my friends had lived in this town their entire lives, and they were all itching to get a glimpse inside our enigmatic house. One of them, residing across the street, took me aside during the festivities. "You know," she began, casting her gaze around the room, "this place is weirder than you think." Curious, I prodded her to continue. "Weirder how?" "I've heard some stories," she replied, her eyes locked onto mine. "People say this house used to be a funeral home." Caught off guard, I chuckled. "Oh, I'm aware." She eyed me with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. "Really?" she pressed. "Yeah." I confirmed. "We had some work done in the washroom near the garage, and the contractor mentioned weather sealing on the pantry door. This section at the back of the house was added later, probably for transporting bodies. I think the viewing area was likely where my parents' bedroom is now." She gasped, her eyes widening. "No way." I nodded, thinking back to similar conversations I'd had with the high school janitor, the school secretary, my English teacher, and even two parents at one of the football games. "And surely you've heard about the pool," she prodded. I was immediately intrigued. "What pool?" "Pool that used to be in the backyard," she replied. "Hannah always talked about it. The family who lived here before had an above-ground pool that was always covered, even during the summer." My interest deepened. "What's so strange about that?" "Well," she hesitated, "it was never used. It's like they were hiding something beneath the tarp." I laughed it off. "It could have been for extra storage. My mom has 2 storage spaces because of all our stuff." She shrugged, her eyes lingering on me. "I don't know. It's just that this place is really strange, you know." "It's a nice house," she assured me, "but it's weird." I couldn't help but agree. "Okay, yeah, it's weird." After the party and in the ensuing months, I couldn't shake these stories from my mind. Visions of lurking entities in the crawl space, the mysterious closet, or under the tarp-covered pool became recurring nightmares. To cope, I established a nightly ritual of securing all the doors and deliberately avoiding glancing at the windows. My thoughts dwelled on classic horror tropes that cautioned against letting one's guard down. One fateful night, with the school year behind us and my family at home, I decided to do some late-night laundry. As I locked up the house, a peculiar motion outside the window captured my attention. Instead of dismissing it, I challenged the darkness, defiantly taunting any potential threat to reveal itself. Yet, as I ascended the creaking stairs, an eerie sense of a shadow trailing me persisted. It was a fleeting presence, vanishing as I turned to confront it. Disconcerted but cautious, I finally reached my room, only to encounter another unexplained occurrence. The room's light switched off, plunging me into darkness. Panic gripped me as I hesitated to reach for my phone or sleeping mask. I was paralyzed. Then I remembered my older sister. Had she been responsible for the light? But that didn't make sense. I would have heard her door. My futile attempts to rationalize the situation led to no conclusions. The hum of the air conditioner brought some solace, but I couldn't shake the persistent unease. Why had the light switched off? I lay in bed, 3 layers of covers pulled tightly around me, fervently praying that demons couldn't breach this makeshift barrier. Despite the stifling heat, I remained under my protective cocoon. At some point, I dared to sit up. My sister was babysitting elsewhere, meaning she couldn't have turned off the light. This realization intensified my fear. I spent the night in a state of vigilant alertness, my restless thoughts racing. Now I find myself away from that haunting house at my aunt's, where I'm grateful for a 2-week reprieve from its eerie mysteries. As I prepare for church camp, I can't help but wonder why our dog Patch had been yelping for hours before falling silent that night. He seemed fine the next morning, but the memories of that night continued to haunt me, leaving me questioning the secrets hidden within the walls of our enigmatic home. Story 5. Growing Up Among Ghosts. My haunted childhood in a Kentucky funeral home. As a young child, the funeral home was a place filled with intriguing mysteries and chilling encounters. The moment my family moved into the Centuries old funeral home, I began to feel a constant presence around me. It was as if the walls whispered secrets and the very air held echoes of the past. Alice, the friendly spirit I mentioned earlier, became a part of my daily life. She had an almost maternal presence, always dressed in a long, flowing black dress that seemed to ripple like a shadow. Her long crimson hair framed a pale face that wore a perpetual smile. Alice was my steadfast companion. Each day I could count on seeing her in various corners of the house, her gentle smile and warm greeting making me feel safe. When I returned from school, Alice would be there, waiting to hear about my day. Our conversations were a comforting routine, and as soon as I shared, she would vanish into the ether. There was a memorable incident in high school when I thought I could sneak out to attend a party. Somehow Alice alerted my mother, who was waiting for me when I returned. It was as if Alice had a protective eye on me even from the beyond. Alice also revealed her extraordinary power when she protected me from a sinister, non-human spirit in the embalming room. This creature, which I referred to as the reptilian spirit, remains etched in my memory. The first time I stumbled upon the embalming room, curiosity got the better of me. I was exploring the unfamiliar surroundings when a chilling growl filled the air. I looked up and saw a creature that defied description. It resembled a young girl, but its scaly skin, snake-like tongue, and menacing red eyes marked it as something unnatural. Frozen with fear, I watched as Alice intervened. She stood between me and the reptilian entity, which appeared utterly terrified in her presence. What followed was surreal. Alice extended her arm, and the creature began to levitate, its movements akin to the infamous Darth Vader chokehold. In a final act, Alice swept her arm to the side, and the creature was flung into the wall before disappearing. Afterward, Alice knelt in front of me, advising me to be more careful. The true nature of Alice remains a mystery. Was she a human spirit with extraordinary abilities or something altogether different? Now let's revisit the reptilian spirit. Besides the encounter when Alice protected me, I frequently saw it in different parts of the funeral home. It seemed to relish climbing walls and even the ceiling. Its piercing stare and menacing growls were unsettling, but it never made a move to harm me. Alice's presence seemed to keep it at bay. Moving on to the Grey Man. This enigmatic spirit had a preference for the chapel. Taller than most and clad in a gray suit with a black tie, he often stood quietly. Occasionally he'd offer a friendly wave. It was as if he had a deep connection with the chapel, especially the organ. The spirit of the little girl added an element of innocence to our home. In the living room, her laughter would often precede her appearance. She'd materialize before you, a vision of a young girl in a pink dress with long, flowing blonde hair. After a brief encounter, she'd vanish, leaving behind a sense of playfulness. Lastly, there was the general. This young man, seemingly attired in a military dress uniform from a bygone era, carried an air of politeness. He didn't utter many words, but his courteous tip of the hat whenever we crossed paths spoke volumes. Sometimes we'd also catch glimpses of an elderly couple dressed in Victorian-style attire, standing side by side. Their presence added an air of elegance and history to our surroundings. Growing up in a haunted funeral home was an extraordinary journey, filled with a cast of spectral characters that made our home unlike any other. While some experiences were spine-tingling, others were heartwarming. These resident spirits were a unique part of my upbringing, leaving an indelible mark on my life.